Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again. So today's topic is expectations. Let me define it first and then I'll tell you my thoughts. So when I think of the word expectation, I think of basically an idea or a thought that I have that determines how I want something to go. So if I have an expectation of something, then I'm going to think that something specific is going to happen and I'm kind of just counting on it. And so when an expectation isn't met, typically the reaction is disappointment or some kind of negative. It could be anger, it could be sadness, but it's usually a negative emotion that we feel when an expectation isn't met. So I want to think about, expectations in general are things that we just set. We can set them intentionally. Like I'm going into a situation and let's say I have a doctor's appointment. I'm going to show up for my appointment and my expectation is that my doctor is going to be there and he's going to call me in at the appointment time that I have, and then I'm going to get my appointment done, and then I'm going to leave. And then I'm going to go and resume my day. Some expectations are really not super defined. It can just be like, my expectation is to not fall on my face today, but I don't really operate my day or plan around that. It's just kind of an unspoken expectation. So we have certain things that we expect to have happen or we count on in our day. And the reality is that a lot of the time our mood is determined by these expectations being met, whether they are, well, I'll kind of elaborate as we go. So if my expectation is not met, it's going to affect my mood, and it works like this for everyone. Very rarely do you find that people are so easygoing that they're never disappointed or upset when something that they're expecting or planning doesn't go according to plan. So as I'm talking about expectations, I want you to really apply this kind of generally, because this can apply to situations, appointments, like I was talking about with the doctor, or it can also apply to people. So if I have an expectation of a person to behave a certain way, to treat me a certain way, or to do a certain thing in a role or a responsibility, then I'm assigning an expectation to a person. And we all do this. Again, some of these expectations are thought through, and we create these expectations based on certain situations or roles. And then there are expectations that are they kind of just come naturally. We don't really think them through. Like, I expect that if if I'm going to be picked up by my friend or my husband and I'm supposed to be at a certain place at a certain time, they're going to pick me up, then I expect them to pick me up. I'm going to think through it, I'm going to plan around it. Whereas other plans, like, hey, other situations, I expect that my kid's not going to throw his food on the floor, but I don't go through my day thinking like, oh my gosh, I hope my kid doesn't throw his food on the floor. No, that's just unspoken. Like, don't throw your stuff on the floor, you're 9, right? So again, spoken or unspoken, or thought through, unthought through, these aren't actual terms. I'm just kind of making it up as I go, but that's how I distinguish expectations. So here's the problem. And I actually have had this conversation with several clients recently, and I think this is something that's good for all of us to be aware of in ourselves, is we have certain expectations that we don't realize control our mood the way they do. And some of these expectations are kind of unrealistic. I know several people who have expectations of people, whether they're people that they interact with on a personal basis or just people in general. And these expectations sometimes are not fair or they're not realistic. And so if I expect you to do something that you are not capable of doing, and then I feel disappointed because you didn't live up to that expectation, that's a problem. But that's my problem. It's not your problem. So if you have a child and your child is 6, but your expectation is that your kid is going to be able, let's say they love to read, and they have their little books that they read that are age appropriate, level appropriate, but then you really, really want them to read Harry Potter. And you say, hey, I know you love Harry Potter. Here's the book. I want you to read it. Well, if they can't read it, or they struggle, or they're really not pulled in, then if you get disappointed, that's on you. Your kids shouldn't be reading Harry Potter at age 6, even if they love the movies and they're super interested in it. It's not an age appropriate expectation. They're not at that reading level unless your kid's just an amazing reader and well beyond his or her years. So if your kid fails at that or doesn't meet that expectation, that's not your kid's fault. That's your fault. You had an expectation that wasn't realistic. So that's kind of a simple example of what I'm talking about, but then where it gets a little bit more complicated, it's when you have an expectation of a person to treat you a certain way or to know what you want without them really having the ability to know that. So if your expectation is that whenever you go into a new situation that people are going to come talk to you and immediately introduce themselves to you and want to get to know you, well, that would be awesome, but that's not really a fair expectation to have of people, because you're assuming that every one of the people that you meet in your life are going to be outgoing, confident, super social, good at approaching people. And so if you walk into a situation and no one comes and talks to you, you could feel really upset that, people are just rude. You could take it personally and feel like people don't like you, or people don't want to talk to you, or you're not interesting, or any number of negatives. But the reality might just be that they're just as shy as you are, or they're not just going to walk up to a random person and talk to them. But I know people who have that very specific kind of expectation. And when it doesn't go their way, they take it so personally. They have themselves convinced that no one's going to want to talk to them, so they just shouldn't go to any new social situation, or that they're never going to make good friends, they're always going to be isolated. And then that belief completely shapes the way they view other people, the way they view themselves in society, the way they view their future of being alone. And that can spiral to depression or anxiety. It can spiral to suicidal thoughts because you feel so alone and isolated in the world. So one thought, one expectation can really cause this spiral effect of just a complete misunderstanding or a complete mistaken belief about people. Apply that same example to kids. If you have a kid who expects that they are going to always do well in school because their parent, let's say you tell your kid that you're really, really good at math, and that, math is easy and they shouldn't have any struggles with math because it runs in their family. Everyone in their family is good at math. So now you're going to set an expectation for your kid, and the kid's going to set an expectation for themselves that this shouldn't be something that they struggle with. This should be something that comes naturally to them. So then when they go to school and math starts getting more difficult or more complicated, if they start to struggle, well, now they're going to think that maybe there's something wrong with them. Okay, they might say something like, why is this so hard for me? Everyone else in my family doesn't struggle with math, so there's something wrong with me. I'm not smart enough. Maybe I'm just not going to ever be good at math. I'm not going to try anymore because I'm never going to be as good as my parents, or whatever. It happens that quickly. And for those of you who may not have experience working with people who have negative thoughts and depression or just anxiety or just low self-esteem, you might kind of laugh at this and think that's not possible. It's textbook. Like, it's so common. It happens so frequently. And unfortunately, it can happen very easily. You can have one negative experience that results in a disappointment or a broken expectation of some sort, or some kind of assigned belief. And if you just have that negative interaction with that person or that thing, that could be it. That could be the thing that makes someone completely insecure. And it's fragile. I mean, the reality is our mental health can be super fragile. Not for everyone. Some people are incredibly resilient and it takes a lot to really affect them, but it really is luck of the draw a lot of the time. It's what are you going through at the time that you're going through it? What other external circumstances could be affecting your mindset when something happens? Are you tired at the time that you experience this negative interaction? Are you hungry? Are you lonely? Did someone bully you today? And now you have a kind of a weaker mindset when you experience something difficult. It impacts you so heavily. So this can happen to kids, this can happen to adults. I mean, there are lots of adults who are super confident, strong, independent people, and then they'll go through a relationship with someone who repeatedly tells them that they're not good, or they're not pretty or attractive or not smart enough. And you hear that enough, or even if it's just one significant situation, then you start to develop this expectation that other people see me like this, and people must believe this about me. If this significant other of mine is saying this about me, then it must be true. And so now their expectation is going to be to be viewed negatively, or to not be good enough, or to feel inferior in some way. And so it just kind of sets the tone and just creates a world of its own. So when kind of going back to relationships, if your expectation is that someone is going to do a certain thing, I really, really want to challenge you. Be mindful of your expectations of people. Be mindful of expectations of people that you know who are close to you, and be mindful of people in general, like your expectations of people in general. So if you're scrolling through your social media and you're looking at very random posts from influencers or someone that you don't know personally, but that appeals to you, is attractive, or is creating a craft or a hobby that you really admire, if you look at that and your expectation is they're just naturally really, really good at that, I don't have what it takes, then you've just created a separation between yourself and this other peer person that you might then apply generally and feel like you're just not good enough, and that other people are just naturally good at things. Whereas that person on the other end of that video could have a complete team of people that help them create whatever it is that you just looked at and wished you could do. Or if your expectation is that other people are going to judge you for a certain thing, or other people aren't going to like you, or your expectation is that people should treat you like, if I post something on Facebook and I expect everyone I know to comment on it, and then I get disappointed when they don't, well, that's my problem. They didn't tell me that they were going to do that. I expected that of them. And that's not fair. They didn't give me false hope. I just assigned an expectation to them. So this is super common. We all do it. I know I have expectations. It could be something as simple as, I didn't expect you to get mad at that thing that I just told you, and that was super innocent. Like, I, saw this joke or read this joke and I'm repeating it to you and you got offended by it. Well, if that catches me by surprise and I'm not expecting that, that's because I had an expectation that you were going to react a certain way. And that's like, there's really nothing that we can do to completely erase expectations. They just come with the territory of, interacting with other people and living. But there are certain things that we can do to learn from our experiences to modify our expectations. So if I told you this joke that you took offense to and I didn't expect that, well, now I hope I'm going to learn from that and be like, okay, note to self, this person really doesn't appreciate these kinds of jokes. Let me change the way I interact with this person. Now let me remember that I cannot expect them to find that funny. It's going to bother them. Let me not do that anymore. So it's learning from our experiences. But what happens is that there are some people who really struggle with self-awareness. So they'll have expectations of people. And when people don't meet those expectations, they don't look at themselves as, maybe my expectation is too high or unrealistic. I'm just going to stop talking to this person. And sometimes that is the right thing to do. If someone hurts you in a way that is intentional and they're just not nice people, they don't treat you with respect, then yeah, you probably should cut that off. And obviously details matter, right? I'm not telling you what to do here, but evaluate it. And if you consult someone near you who's close to you and says, yeah, that was really not nice, you should probably distance yourself from them, that's great. But if everyone around you or a couple of close people are like, hey, that's not a fair expectation, your expectations are too high, you keep getting disappointed because you're expecting people to do things that they're not capable of, I want you to listen to that. There is a reason that people around you are telling you that your expectations are too high. Now, if the people telling you this are manipulative, yeah, you probably don't want to listen to them. But you know the difference between someone who you trust and someone who you don't trust. If your mom or your sibling or your spouse who has always been honest and trustworthy, if they're the ones trying to bring your attention to that, please consider the truth behind that, that maybe there's something to it that you need to evaluate. I'm not saying completely change your expectations based on what other people are saying. I'm just saying consider it, look at it, evaluate if maybe there is truth to it. Maybe you are expecting too much of people, or maybe you're not expecting enough of people. In some situations, you might be settling. You might be in a relationship with someone who treats you like garbage and is super disrespectful, and you think it's fine and it's normal. But if the people around you are saying, hey, that's really rude, I don't like the way she talks to you or he talks to you, consider it. Just keep your eyes open and try to see if maybe there's something to it. So, all of this to say is, please be aware. Just think about, how do you look around at people? Are you expecting that, people in public are always respectful? Well, if that's the case, you're going to be disappointed because not everyone is respectful. Some people are terrible drivers. Some people have really no bedside manner. Some doctors are rude. Some, customer service people are incompetent and don't know what they're doing. Like, there's always the possibility that someone isn't going to do their job well, or doesn't even know how to do their job, or is just not a nice person. But if your expectation is that people should behave a certain way, there's always the possibility for disappointment, because no one can live up to the standard 100%. Some people, you may know someone who's in one role in their profession and they're amazing at it, and then you find someone else in the same role but is awful at it. It's just part of life. Or you might personally be so good at doing something. Let's say that I, as a therapist, if I have a certain style and I, handle things a certain way, I interact with my clients a certain way, and then I go to a therapist and their style is completely different from mine. Well, that doesn't mean they're a bad therapist. That just means they're different. They have a different personality and a different way of doing things. So yeah, if it doesn't fit me, fine. But my expectation needs to be that if I'm going to go look for a therapist, probably not going to find myself, because I'm me. No one else is me, right? I could find someone similar, but if my expectation is to find me, I might as well just give up before I start. It's not going to happen, right? So be mindful of your expectations. Look at it in relation to the people in your family, the people you have close relationships with, and look at it in relation to people that you randomly interact with throughout your day. Just ask yourself, when I got frustrated, when I got irritated or sad or whatever, any negative, that's the cue to be like, okay, did I have an expectation that wasn't met? And if so, what was it? Why did I have that expectation? So the strategy to even explore if your expectations are good or bad is listen to your body. If you have a negative emotional reaction to something, try to look at that. Try to ask yourself, what was that about? Was I feeling or thinking something that had to do with an expectation? And a lot of the time, the answer is going to be yes. Not always, but a lot of the time. So take that with you, think through it, filter your emotions through that as you're going through your day, through that question. And then I hope that it just kind of helps you be a little bit more self-aware. All right, thank you guys. Have a good rest of your day.